Hey everyone, it's Jim
and Charles
from Valves & More, an online vintage tube store. And today in Tube Lab number 211, we're going to take a look at system layout. And we're going to actually drop in on three systems that we've set up in our music room. And we're going to talk about the merits of each as well as the disadvantages of each. And hopefully it'll give you a hand figuring out how best to do your own system. But first caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. Well, system layout has changed a lot since I was a young wannabe audiophile. Back in the 70s, and that's the 1970s, folks, everyone went vertical, more often than not in a dedicated vertical shelf system, possibly even with a nice smoked glass door. And of course, the turntable perched right on top. Now, if you really had your stuff together, you might have a professional rack mount system. And again, you're going to go vertical. But in that case, you're going to have ears on each end of your gear that allows you to literally bolt and of course you need a strong faceplate, would allow you to bolt in a rack mount, and you would bolt vertically like that. And in fact, years ago I worked part-time in a movie theater, and it was a wonderful movie theater. It was a vintage theater, so it had been originally a vaudeville house, and it had gone over to silent film, and then it went over to talkies. So in the original booth we had everything was rack mounted on a double rack system. So we had equipment on the left, equipment on the right, and some genius put the racks on coasters and installed a light bulb in the back so that you could get into that rat's nest and do some wiring and, you know, work if you needed to. So rack mount has always been a pro system, though years ago some high-end systems went that way, and it was a thing for a while. I don't think a lot of you are going to have systems like that. Most equipment's not being designed like that, so you would have to go rack mounted today. You're either running vintage equipment that originally was designed for rack mount. You're using pro equipment, which in home audio that doesn't really work that well. Or you're going to have to modify your gear. So, but why don't we just start with the simplest possible system layout you could imagine.
And this is something that a lot of people with maybe an introductory tube amp would have set up. What we've got here is an OTL headphone amplifier using a couple of 6AS7 tubes. These ones actually happen to be from Svetlana. And we have it being driven by a digital source here. This is our Concube, one of our digital media players. And it's driving a pair of beautiful Sennheiser 660 second editions.
And what does it sound like?
Oh, it sounds great.
Now this is your prototype. This is actually your second headphone amp design.
And the first OTL design that we came up with. I had wanted to build an OTL for quite some time, and it just has a very different dynamic sound to it. The frequency response on this is absolutely incredible. It's amazing how low it can go in the low frequencies whenever you don't have an output transformer.
And there's an immediacy to the sound.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're right there in the recording studio. Now, of course, bad recordings sound incredibly bad because you hear right into the mastering with something like this. But a good recording just sounds fantastic. Now, the beauty of this setup is that you don't need speakers. You could have
very compact.
If you're living in a dorm room or sharing a house with people or an apartment with people, and you can't, have a main system up and running, don't despair. Someday you'll have a great main system, but this can be your main system. And if you spend a little bit of money on decent quality stuff, not high-end stuff, but decent quality stuff, you can have sound. In fact, the sonics of this little setup that we have here are superior to the main system. Not necessarily the listening enjoyment, but if we were just to measure how good the slew rate is,
the frequency response, the distortion amounts,
the clarity of the signal.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to see why. The signal paths are extremely short. You can buy a pair of speakers, otherwise known as headphones, that sit on your ears.
Very good ones.
Very good ones for a fraction of what a very good equivalent speaker system would cost. So this is a great way to go. What about taking a look at sort of a modern take on a vertical rack mount? Did I say rack mount? I did.
On a vertical stacked system.
Yeah.
Let's change the view up and go take a look at one.
Okay, so we've got our Wilsonton R8 here, which is a large integrated amplifier, and in my opinion is one of the better buys out there. If you want some power and you want a modern amp that sounds good, that's reasonably affordable, you're pretty much looking at buying a Chinese-made amp. And Charles, 90% of all equipment being manufactured and sold these days is probably made in China?
Yeah, most likely.
So this is proven to be pretty good. I mean, we use it in the business commercially, and we've had it now for 3 years at least. Maybe 4.
It has needed a bit of work on it, but nothing that is surprising really.
Yeah, given the hours that we've put on it. So
yeah.
So what we've got here is sort of the modern take on a shelf system. This actually came out of a high-end audio store. So it's got, I don't know, you can't see it at the bottom here, but it's got, am I upside down?
No.
I'm leaning over anyways. It's got spiky feet, and it's got pads to mount them on and all that sort of stuff. With something like this, if you don't have a turntable in your system, so you're just running digital, which is really common these days, you can put the big heavy amp on top. Down below, we've got a phono preamp, because the one thing that, even though the Wilsonton is an integrated amplifier, so it's got a preamp and a power amp inside the chassis, and it's even got a headphone amp that sounds really quite good. It doesn't have a phono preamp, which is normal these days. Years and years ago, because everybody was running vinyl, we were all playing records. So that was everybody's system was a vinyl system.
And so they often have them integrated already.
Yeah, so almost always there was a phono preamp built into the integrated amp or into your receiver. So down here we've got our universal phono preamp, and beside it we've got the proto DAC. I don't know if you can see it that clearly. That's a really neat. It's basically a custom build that we did.
Yeah, based on a Raspberry Pi, but with some great custom PCBs that people have made for it.
Yeah, and there's some people online that have got some YouTube channels who do all kinds of work around this sort of thing, and that's really great. And this is, even though this DAC is only a 16-bit DAC, it will play higher bit rates, but you just basically drop the bits off. Anyways, I digress. I can get passionate about gear. This is a very viable way to set things up, because your system is relatively small. You've got the big monster on top where you can, the heat can just rise off of it. It's not enclosed. You really wouldn't want to put any kind of big amp that's going to generate a lot of heat down below a shelf. That would be,
or inside an enclosed stereo cabinet.
That would be even worse.
Yeah.
So the big heat generators should be out in the open. And things like the little phono preamp, they don't make that much heat, and of course the DAC doesn't make any heat, or almost none at all. So anyway, so this would be viable, and of course you would have your speakers left and right with a decent amount of separation, depending on your room size, for stereo separation. Okay, now why don't we go into our main system setup and have a look at what we think is probably a very good way of doing system layout. Okay, so this is our main critical listening system. Now it changes all the time, but what we've done is we've set it up as basically a vinyl only system right now. In fact, we normally listen in analog pretty much all the time, though we have a whole bunch of DACs lying around. So what I want to really show you is the layout as it pertains to how the signal is generated. So on the far right we have a turntable. We have this is actually our modern line phono preamp, and this is the first production prototype build. We just finished it a couple of days ago, and it sounds really great, but we've got a few things to iron out. And beside it, we've got our control preamp. This is the modern line Rocket, and that actually is going out to test builders soon. And it's a very compact system, but the thing to look at is everything is up on basically one platform. This is a custom credenza that I built, but there's all kinds of credenzas out there for sale that, are ex-Office and
a lot of purpose-built media consoles that are similar to this in design.
Yeah. I mean, what would be really cool is to have a big chunk of live edge hardwood of some kind mounted on some big sturdy legs. That would be awesome. Anyways, below it is just basically a service area. So we've got extra gear and parts and things like that. But where the low signal starts at the turntable, or you can have a DAC in this position, we progress to a preamplifier stage, so the phono preamp in this case, where that low signal is amplified. It's a fairly short signal path to get to here, and then it's a really short hop to get over to the preamplifier, the control preamp. And so this, of course, processes the RIAA equalization and brings the very low signal of the record up to approximately 1 volt RMS, which is, in most systems, we could call that line voltage. It's typically what you're going to see. And over here we take that 1 volt RMS, the nominal 1 volt, and we boost this up so that we can drive
just about anything, really.
Yeah.
That preamp has a great output. It can go up over 36 volts, I believe.
Yeah, and nobody is going to need that. But in this case, it's driving a pair of our URI monoblocks, and we're going to look at where those are located in a minute. But the important features of the way this system is laid out is if you think about the way traditional systems are done, in which the patch cords are all done in the rear, well, in the rear of any piece of gear is the IEC, so you've got your house mains AC, which is noisy, coming in. You've got transformer, you've got power supply, you've got rectification.
You've got switch mode power supplies, other signal cables, things like that.
So that's the noisiest place you've got, and that's where you're putting your signal as well, if you've got rear jacks. By mounting your connections on the top, you can come in really close to the where the signal needs to land into the preamplifier stage or the amplifier stage, and you're up in the air. And up in the open air is today in a modern home or business or concert venue. Open air is still noisy, but relative to the rear of this gear, it's quiet. up here in the open air with no modem too close is a great place to send shielded cable, RCA patch cords, XLR connections as well would be, in my opinion, would even be superior up here. And short signal paths. I can't stress enough how important it is when the signal is low, it's vulnerable. So I know you can imagine that that a patch cord that's well built is well shielded, or an XLR is going to have good common mode rejection. But the fact is, they're never 100% perfect. So no matter how good your shielding is, or how good your XLR balanced cables are, they're still vulnerable. So by keeping your signal path in a good clean area and short, that makes a huge difference. So what about the power amps? Well, they're not up here. In fact, commonly they would be. There's a good spot for them right over here. And years ago, that's what we did. We always had our monoblocks up on this credenza. And then we tried something. And I'm going to give a shout out to Paul at PS Audio. The guy's been around forever, and
he's a wealth of information.
He is. He's an encyclopedia of information. And he talked about this quite a bit at length. And he said, don't be afraid of making a long run from after you've put the gain up on your signal to your monoblocks. And he said it's really surprising if you can get your speaker cables from your power amps short, get those cables shortened up, and not worry about the long run over from the preamp. He said it's a bit of a trade-off, but sonically, he said it's a superior method.
And if you have good quality cables and a preamp with a low output impedance, it makes very little difference for the sound to have that long run.
Yeah, and the output impedance of all of our control preamps are all low. Not low like you would get in a solid state system, but low for a tube system. Somewhere around 1K ohm, which is perfectly fine. How about we just pop over and take a look in the corner on the floor and see, what the monoblocks look like. Okay, so it's actually on the hearth of our stone fireplace. We've got the Uri monoblock, and it's so close to the speaker that I think I made up a pair of standard 6-foot cables. They're custom-made cables, but and this it was one of those moments where we had one leap forward in sonics, and the difference between putting the power amplifiers close to the preamplifiers and then running a fairly long 16-foot speaker cable versus a shorter speaker cable and a longer preamp cable. RCA, by the way, I'm a big fan of running unbalanced signal paths. The difference in clarity was absolutely immediately noticeable. We were both quite surprised, actually, when we did it this way, because I thought, well, it'll be sort of so close we can't tell. But we could tell
right away.
Yeah, we could tell right away. But the benefits of putting, especially for running monoblocks, but if you've got a stereo amplifier, putting the big monster down closer to the speakers. If you had a stereo amp, you could put it in between the speakers, so your speaker runs are balanced. In our setup, this works just really well. Now, I custom make cables, and at some point I'm hoping to have cables available in the store. So I custom made a pair of 16-foot well-shielded RCA cables for the run, and of course I measured them to make sure that they were on spec. And even though they're another 13 feet longer at least than what we would have, about 13 feet longer than we would have had if we had put the power amps up on the credenza, they still had very low resistance on the shielding, on the signal path, and the capacitance was just fine.
So it's better to have the length between those stages than it is from the speakers over to the power amplifiers.
Yeah, and I think if there's there's a lot of ways you can do this. I mean, this is sort of a hybrid design or a hybrid layout, because the main system is horizontal on top of a shelf, basically. In this case, a nice credenza that I made. But and then it's a hybrid because we have two levels. We're down low with the power amplifiers, with the monoblocks, and and actually I wanted to mention that we got our Uri monoblocks. We put them in because we were actually just going to clean. I was going to clean up and finish the nice plinths on the GU50s, and these sounded so great in system. We just never changed them out.
Yeah, we'll probably put the GU50s back in there before too long, but it's nice to have a change.
Yeah, and it'll probably be love all over again. But the main point of looking at system layouts is to get you thinking about what's the logical way to start with the source of the music and move your way progressively in a logical way so that each component is close to the next as possible in a good low noise position. If it's a really big heat generator like a monoblock or like the Wilsonton R8 that we were looking at, actually even the OTL headphone amp that we started with is a big heat generator. You'd want that sitting on top of something.
Yeah, you want good airflow for those guys.
Yeah. So, and everybody's system is going to be different. And it's going to depend on your room space, your equipment, where you're at in the development of your system. But do the best you can. Think about optimizing what you've got to work with, and you might be surprised that a little bit of optimization will bring you up a good notch.
It can make a big difference.
Yeah. Now Charles has got some really nice tubes to show off. How about we head back over to the lab and take a look at them? Well, Charles, what came in?
Okay, well, we got some beautiful tubes in here, just like we did last week. Unfortunately, no more GZ34s or 5AR4s in yet. There are some on the way.
Well, how long did the last lot that we put in the store last?
Well, we were hoping it was going to last the weekend. Well, maybe not hoping. We were expecting it to last the weekend. It lasted all of 2 hours after they were put in the store.
Yeah, so a very high demand tube. So, and well, I'm thinking within a couple of weeks we'll have a few more. So
yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep our eyes open for them. Clearly, you guys want them, so we're going to try and find more good vintage ones for you.
And talking about a very high demand tube, what have you got?
So we were lucky enough to find some lightly used, possibly new old stock, but we're selling them as used, KT88 Svetlanas. These are the original Svetlana St. Petersburg. Of course, as you guys are probably tired of by now, you can tell by the rectangular holes in the plates. And these are some of the nicest KT88 tubes that were ever made, in our opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Svetlana, in fact, every tube that we've ever put in circuit that was made by the true Svetlana factory in St. Petersburg have been fantastic.
Oh, they've all sounded great. It's almost like they had a house sound, just like how we talk about the Sylvania house sound.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is the quality of the tubes, the sonics of them. I would put them on a parallel with Mullard, and they still don't have the reputation of a Mullard or a Philips or a Telefunken. But I think people are slowly catching up to that fact.
I might be getting muddled a little bit because of the modern production Svetlana stuff that shares absolutely nothing with these other than the name.
Yeah, it's hard to find a power tube, though, any power tube, vintage or modern, like the Svetlanas. I mean, Svetlana made the 6550C, which in my opinion is the best sounding 6550 ever made, and we have some inventory, and that's basically a slightly lower powered version of this. It's almost the same frame, though it's not exactly the same frame. There's actually an extra structure on the top of this, and the bottle gets a little bit bigger for the higher powered KT88. But the real, I think the the real bonus of the vintage Svets is the mid-range of the 6550 and the KT88s. It's got a nice little touch of warmth, which is not common in either vintage KT88s or modern ones especially. And it makes a big difference. If your mid-range, where 90% of your recorded music is being reproduced, is dead flat, your whole system is going to have a hard time sounding musical. Get a little bit of mid-range warmth and all of a sudden, wow, everything changes.
Yeah. So we were lucky enough to find a number of these. So I think I have 3 matched quads have used in the store, which it's been ages since we've had a single matched quad in.
Yeah, and how are they testing?
Beautiful. Above new old stock, most of them, and that's a very good sign for something that's been used. It means it has lots of life left in it. It's going to last a long time. It's a good sign for a power tube.
Well, we think quite a few of them are probably new old stock, but they've been banging around quite a bit. I don't think we have the original boxes for them.
Oh, actually, we do for most of them.
Do we? Okay. Well, that's good. But in keeping with our practice, unless we're absolutely certain something's new old stock, we sell them as used and, of course, price them as used. So this was a nice find. Now, with any power tube, but particularly any higher powered tube, always buy a matched bearer if it's available. I don't know if we have any this time, but that's always a recommendation I make. Power tubes just don't last as long as small signal tubes. And talking about small signal tubes, you've got a couple of really nice ones in.
Yeah, so we've been exploring more 6CG7s lately, which of course is just the 9-pin version of a 6SN7. And we had some of these in here a while ago. This is the Matsushita made 6CG7 out of Japan. And they look very similar to other tubes that we love from Japan, like the Hitachis and the Toshibas. But these ones do have a slightly different build on the inside, and they have their own unique sound. Matsushita is another one of those great manufacturers where everything that we've listened to from them has sounded great. At one point, they had actually had a bunch of Muller tooling set up for certain types of tubes, not this one, of course. And these are great. So we've got some nice matched pairs that are new old stock and used in the store, and they're just great sounding tubes.
Now, when we say Muller tooling, what we're probably talking about is the parent corporation, Philips, Dutch Philips, probably made the deal with Matsushita, but Muller had a huge amount of both manufacturing capacity. I think they had 3 large UK plants. The main one was in Blackburn, UK. But everything that we've seen reference-wise say that Muller did the tooling. So Muller had a lot of industrial capacity, so that would probably make sense that the Muller engineers and techs actually sourced the equipment. A lot of it they probably made in-house. And of course, everybody knows how good Muller or Philips, or any of the subsidiaries of Philips.
They tended to buy up good factories and good companies that like to produce quality components. So.
And sometimes they kept the original production just the way it was, but often they brought over designs and tube types from Holland and from the UK.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can see identical looking tubes such as the 12AX7 that they made that were made in Blackburn, in Holland, in Australia, I believe some in France, in Canada, all over the place. They use the same structure on them.
Yeah, it wasn't until later, though, that they actually ended up with a U.S. plant when they bought out Sylvania, at least the Sylvania Tube division, in the early 1980s.
Yeah, and going back to these 6CG7s, this is all you need right here in order to turn it into a 6SN7. Just one of these 9-pin to octal adapters that's designed for the 6CG7 base pinout.
Yeah, and it's an exact electrical equivalent to a 6SN?
It is, yep, to the GTA or GTB versions of them. They just shrunk them down into a smaller bottle because, of course, things needed more tubes then, and they wanted them to be as compact as possible.
Now, does it sound like a 6SN7?
No, it's got its own unique sound, but, there's such a huge variety of 6SN7s out there that they have a lot of uniqueness to them, too, and these just bring a whole new variety to the table. So... Well, it's something fun to roll in.
Yeah, it does change up the sonics dramatically. It's a much more clean, open sound than the 6SN7.
Yeah, especially the Japanese versions. They tend to have their own sort of unique variety to them.
Yeah, that's true. Well, if you stay to the very end, here's some discount codes to help you out. There's a secret code that's not so secret, that's easy to figure out. People have been grabbing this code and costing us a lot of money, which is great. That's returning customers, then that's viewers like you. So we love that.
Speaking of viewers like you, how many are we up to now on the channel? We keep forgetting to mention this.
Oh, yeah, we rolled 7,000 subscribers 2 or 3 weeks ago.
And we keep forgetting.
Yeah, and our other companion channel, Melatonin Amps, with the introduction, well, soon to be introduction of our new modern line, wow, the subscriber numbers have been just climbing steadily. And it's been this channel is sort of a niche channel, but Melatonin Amps has been a niche inside of a niche.
Yep. So it's nice to see it getting some growth.
Yeah, and we can reach almost everybody with flat rate $20 shipping. But if your order is $150 or more after discount, the shipping's on us, folks. Stay safe, everyone. Have fun. This is Jim.
And Charles.
Signing off. Cheers, everyone.